Okay, I'll go ahead and start. Hello, and welcome to this month's Master Gardener webinar. We'll get started in just a moment, but first I'd like to talk about Skillshare on Canopy. Skillshare videos are new to Canopy, a streaming platform available to you for free with your library card. Skillshare is a learning community for creatives and others wanting to build a business and/or learn a new skill. The collection is continuously growing, so be sure to check back periodically for new content. Thank you for your attention. Welcome again. And now I'll pass it over to the webinar coordinator for tonight's program, Jane Frankel.
Thank you, Allie, and thanks to the library again for hosting us, and welcome to all our participants tonight. We have a really beautifully illustrated talk. I'll be introducing our speaker and the talk in just a few moments, but first a few quick housekeeping items to go through. We'll all be muted and have our video turned off while John is presenting. Please use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen to post questions about the webinar to the hosts. The questions will be addressed actually at the end of this presentation tonight. Also, this event will be recorded for educational or promotional use by UC and will be posted on our YouTube channel as well as the libraries. And finally, closed captioning in English is available tonight and when accessing the recording on YouTube. All of our webinars are prepared and presented by UC Master Gardener volunteers who are all part of the mission that we're here to accomplish. And that mission is to extend to the residents of Contra Costa County research-based information on home horticulture, pest management, and sustainable landscaping practices. Next, I'm happy to introduce our amazing expert and speaker for this evening, John Fike, our bug expert and expert on many other topics, in fact. After 34 years on the faculty at UCSF, John retired from academia and soon thereafter became active in the Master Gardener program of Contra Costa County. His passions for biology and education have been instrumental in his contributions to new volunteer training and school programs like Growing Gardeners. But really, John's been a great asset in so many areas, and in fact has been active in multiple other projects, including Ask a Master Gardener, Speakers Bureau, and continuing education for Master Gardeners. One of John's goals as a Master Gardener is to introduce more science into the gardening landscape in the hopes that people will develop an enhanced perspective and appreciation of the fascinating world around us. And on that note, I will turn it over to John. Please remember, post any questions in the Q&A space, but be patient because many of your questions will be covered throughout the webinar.
Very good. Thank you, Jan.
You're welcome.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Thank you for inviting me into your home tonight to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, which is insects. May not be near and dear to your heart, but I'm hoping at the end of this program, you will have a different perspective and understanding and maybe appreciation for these animals that are all around us. I'd like to start with a historical, maybe a philosophical perspective on insects. I was in Egypt a few years ago, beautiful place, a lot of history and antiquities and all that sort of thing. But being the consummate biologist and insect geek, I was amazed to see this depiction all over in Egypt, in temples, on facades, on obelisks, everything. It's a depiction of an insect, a beetle. We know this as the Egyptian scarab. Scarab is just short term for the family name, scientific family name for this type of insect, which is Scarabaeidae. You don't have to remember that. But we saw them everywhere, and even in a hieroglyphic like you see here. But the one that intrigued me the most was this one. This was in the tombs of Ramses IV from many thousands of years ago. And it's in the Valley of the Kings, a Theban necropolis, where King Tut's grave was, just a stone's throw from King Tut's tomb. And what this depicted to me, you saw the Egyptian scarab either pulling or pushing around objects, and it intrigued me because I recognize it as what we know now as a dung beetle. And the female dung beetle lays her egg in some dung or mud and rolls it, balanced on its front feet, as you see here, which is what's depicted in this ancient tomb. Now, the ancient Egyptians likened the movement of these balls of dung, if you will, as the sun across the heavens. And so they made the scarab a solar deity by the name of Khepri. It says the deity of regeneration and rebirth. And the reason I'm telling you this or making a point is that whether it's a science text, a historical text, a theological text, or a wall of an ancient tomb, insects have always been part of the human narrative. And it's incumbent upon us, therefore, to understand them more. Why? Because they're integral components of the ecosystem we call home. My goals tonight are easy or simple. I want to introduce some basic insect biology as we go along and try to explain why it's important. No, you don't have to be a biologist. You don't have to ever have taken a biology course. I'm going to try to make it, I hope, as clear as I can. I'd like to introduce some commonly observed pests or bad bugs and introduce the beneficials, your friends, the good guys, and why their presence is important. Excuse me. So how many of them are there? Probably you all think about, well, we're getting to spring, there's lots of them. And you're absolutely right, there are lots of them. Insects represent over half of all living multicellular organisms. You notice I have an asterisk by multicellular. That means we're not counting bacteria and viruses and things. But if we counted every single plant and every single animal, big and small, on the entire face of the earth, over half of them would be insects. Now, the Smithsonian tried to put a number on that using an algorithm that I have no clue about, nor could I understand if I did. That's a big number, 10 quintillion individual insects alive. A quintillion is a billion billion. Trying to understand a number like that number there in the center of your screen is like trying to understand the universe or infinity. It's very, very difficult. Then some scientists with probably too much time on their hands guesstimated there were 300 pounds of insect for every pound of human on Earth. That's still kind of hard to understand. So since I have no problem humbling myself in front of the public, here I am standing on one side of a scale in my Farmer Bob outfit during a talk I was giving. How many insects am I worth, given that equation, if you will, at the top of the screen? And the answer is 28.5 tons. That's really a lot of insects. Don't calculate my body weight, please. But because there are so many of them, they're the most diverse animal population on the face of the earth. You have big ones, you have small ones, you have brightly colored ones, you have drab ones, you have ones that walk, crawl, hop, fly, swim, eat plants, eat animals. They're beautiful, they're interesting, they're creepy sometimes, but they're very, very fascinating. And I hope you get that feeling as we go through this tonight. The bottom line of this, there sure are lots of them, and they live with us, whether we like it or not. And we need to understand them so that we can thoughtfully manage them. That's what I want to get through to you tonight as we go through this. I want to go through the very fundamental basics of insect biology for just a few minutes. So what distinguishes an insect? Well, you probably know that. Insects are part of a larger group of animals called arthropods. I'm sure many of you remember your Greek, and arthropoda means jointed leg or jointed foot. So all the animals that are considered arthropods have heavily jointed legs, like you see on this insect here. Other arthropods are like spiders or crabs, lobsters, centipedes, millipedes. There's lots of them. So they have heavily jointed legs. Another characteristic of an arthropod is they have their skeleton on the outside of their body rather than the inside. It's called an exoskeleton. Exo means out. In this case, this is a beetle. It's called a zigzag beetle. And the part of the exoskeleton over the wings, this part right here, is called an elytra. The only reason I bring up that term is I'm going to mention it in a few minutes. So the insect has the antenna and the thorax and the head, blah, blah, blah. But the thing that characterizes the insect relative to other arthropods, it has 6 legs. The arachnids, like spiders, have 8, the crabs have 10, and so forth. The last thing of detailed biology I want to talk about is the concept of metamorphosis. Now, some of you are probably rolling your eyes, but I will bet everybody on this call has been introduced to this term sometime in their life. Grammar school, middle school, high school, college. Metamorphosis is a very obvious and abrupt change from an immature form to an adult. I learned it, many of you probably learned it in terms of frogs. Frogs lay their eggs, eggs hatch into tadpoles. A few weeks later, legs start to form. A few weeks later, that lungs start to form. And a couple months after the egg, out pops a fully formed frog. That's different than vertebrates like us. We don't undergo that, but insects do, and it's extremely important to understand this and how it affects our garden ecosystem. So insect metamorphosis has 2 different types, one of which is called complete. In the complete metamorphosis, the adult, as you see here, lays her eggs. Her eggs hatch into what are called larvae. Larvae don't look anything like mom. They do what they're designed to do. They eat plants, they eat animals, whatever they do. And as they grow, they shed their outer skeleton and they get bigger until they're ready to become an adult. And in this case, the larvae form a pupa. If it was a butterfly, it would be called a chrysalis, a moth, a cocoon. And then, depending on temperature and other factors, out pops an adult. That's complete metamorphosis. Incomplete or partial metamorphosis is exactly the same but different. I always like to say that to make it confusing. The female lays her eggs. This time the eggs hatch into what are called nymphs. Nymphs kind of look like mom, but they're not quite there yet, but they grow. And each time they grow, they shed their outer skeleton. They become more and more like the adult till the final molt from the final nymph, they become an adult. So why did I give you all these little details? Because it's very important, because oftentimes it is these immature forms, the nymphs or the larvae, that are the business end of the insect, whether it's a good insect or a pest insect. And we have to keep that in mind and learn that and know that, because it helps us manage the situation better. Let me give you an example of why it's kind of important to understand this life cycle business and metamorphosis. We all love butterflies, all shapes and sizes and colors, and they flit around in the garden, and we're quite happy with them. And they light on a flower, and they have a long tube-like mouth part. It's called a siphoning mouth part that they put down in the flower, and they suck the nectar out. And in doing this, they get pollen on their legs and their bodies. They do no harm to the flower whatsoever. In fact, they're good because they go to another flower and pollinate it. But the thing about butterflies is they lay their eggs, and their eggs hatch into larvae, other known as caterpillars. And depending on the species, they can be devastatingly bad for your garden. The butterfly, the adult, is good. The caterpillar may not be so good. So it's important for us to know these differences for the common types of insects in our garden. So how is it important? Well, it helps us understand insects in general and to identify rather than simply react. If we can identify a larval ladybug, we will leave it alone rather than react and squash it because it looks like some sort of prehistoric thing. Understanding the biology will help us when we want to think about, can beneficial insects actually control the bad guys? Can they do our dirty work for us? And if this appeals to you, if the idea of using good bugs to fight bad bugs, we first need to define a level of tolerance. Is a little bit of damage okay or acceptable? Let me give you an example of what I mean. I was at a farmer's market one time, and a gentleman came up with a jelly jar full of these insects on the left. The big insect, it's about an inch, a little over an inch long. It's a big, it's called a true bug. It is a type of insect that can suck the juices out of the fruit and veggies and cause rotten spots and so on and so forth. And the insects on the right are the nymphs, the babies of this leaf-footed bug. It's called a leaf-footed bug because of this structure here on its hind leg. The gentleman said, "These are all over my blueberries. What can I do to kill them?" We get that question a lot. What can I do to kill them? Well, I was sympathetic, of course, and I said, "Well, are you getting any blueberries at all this year?" And he goes, "Oh, yeah, we're getting all the blueberries we can eat." Oh, I see. Well, how's the plant look? Leaves and stems? It looks great. So, the moral of the story is this. At that particular time, these insects were nothing more than an annoyance because they were there. I'm not saying they couldn't cause damage. Generally, the leaf-footed bug is not a real damaging pest unless there's lots of them, and they're hard to control even with pesticides. But the point is, he didn't have to kill them. He didn't have to do anything with them because they were not doing anything. And if we are thinking about doing biological control of pests, we have to accept the presence and sometimes the damage of some of these insects. That's the tolerance part. However, sometimes more drastic measures are indicated. And I'll go over this later in the talk. And if so, my plea to you is to use the least toxic alternatives. This is not a talk about insecticides or pesticides, but I will talk a little bit about it at the very end in the context of this slide here. So how do we determine who is a good bug and who is not? Given those numbers I gave you before, that's not a trivial task. But there's no easy way to do that based strictly on appearance. You kind of have to know. Let me give you an example. Here are three beetles, and all three of them have brightly colored spotted elytra. Remember, I said the elytra was part of the exoskeleton, that shell over the wings. All three of them have brightly colored spotted elytra. So that if that was your single criterion for goodness or badness, you would be wrong either 1/3 or 2/3 of the time, because the lady beetle is a good guy and the other two are not. Here's another pair. These actually are called true bugs. There's one group of insects. There's 50 to 80,000 species that are actually called true bugs. So all bugs are insects, but not all insects are bugs. That should be clear. Anyway, this is a group. We use bug interchangeably, and I will tonight. It doesn't matter. But these two are actually true bugs. Now you look at them and you can tell them apart. Their head structures are different. Their markings are a little different. But you don't see them like this in the garden. They're flying around. They're running around. If you came to me and said, "Wow, there's this kind of longish, grayish black insect with orange highlights. Is it good or bad?" I'd have to look you in the eye and say, yes. Because the assassin bug is a good guy, he eats bad guys, and the box elder bug is a bad guy if you're a box elder tree. My last examples are these. You probably know the insect on the left, an earwig. I'll talk about them a little bit later, a little more depth, but they are generally considered a pest. The one on the right is called a rove beetle. He's generally considered good because it eats the immature forms and the eggs of the bad bugs like the earwigs. But you look at them here, they kind of look alike. Yeah, you can tell them apart clearly, but they're never like this in the garden. They're running around under your mulch. Easy to misidentify them. So you kind of have to know them. Now you're sitting there going, "You gave us these gigantic numbers. How are we going to know that?" Well, you'll see. I'm going to kind of stay with common pests that you're going to see. But giving this kind of uncertainty thing about goodness and badness, here's a question I have. I often give these questions when I do our training class or in library talks or garden clubs talks, and I'll ask people, raise your hand if you think it's a good bug. You can do this. You can do this at home. Do you think it's a good bug? Raise your hand. And usually we get 90-ish% of the people will raise their hand and say, this is good bug. For those of you who don't know this, I'm sorry, this is a praying mantis. If I ask, is it a bad bug? 5 or 10% reluctantly raise their hand. And then, so what is the answer to this question? It's the answer that master gardeners give to most any question that that they're asked, and that is, it depends. It's contextual because if you see a praying mantis eating a fly like this, most people are going to say he's a good bug. Flies are not one of our favorites usually. But if you see a big pregnant female praying mantis eating a what? Honeybee, you might say, uh-oh, I like honeybees. I like native bees. It's a bad bug. Then there's this. This was taken by a friend of mine off the back of his truck last summer. A praying mantis eating what? A lizard. When I was an undergraduate, I wanted to become a herpetologist, which is the people who study snakes and lizards and toads and frogs and tortoises. I loved lizards and I still do. I look at this and I go, well, I'm not happy with that praying mantis. And then there's this. There was a scientific study undertaken a few years ago when the authors were looking at the eating habits of the praying mantis. And at that point in time, there were about 150-minute documented cases with the praying mantis taking small birds. Hummingbirds were their preference, but they took other small species as well. So it depends. It's context. Very few things in biology are black and white. But let's talk about black and white in the sense that let's talk about the bad bugs. And what I mean by the bad bugs, I'm talking about the common pests that you likely have already had in your garden or you will have in your garden. Guarantee you will see most of these in your garden. So what is the most common insect garden pest? Well, people will answer different questions, but I can tell you one of the most common insect garden pests in my yard are aphids. Aphids are an interesting group of insects. There are about 5,000 different species in the world. About 450 of them are actually important to agricultural entities. Now, we don't see that many species in our backyard, but we see multiple species in our backyard. Aphids are what they say monophagous. They usually eat one plant or one family of plants. And what you see usually is over on the left side of the picture here, where you just see a few of them. So one day you go out and see that, and then you go out 3 days later and you see this, often leading to a response like that. And you go, what is going on here? How could this possibly happen? And this brings us into biology again, to understand the biology of this particular insect, and that females can reproduce without males. It's a process called parthenogenesis. Aphids are not the only insect that do it, but they're probably the gold standard for it. Not only can they reproduce without males, they give birth to live young, which is not very common, and they're all female. And they can give rise to up to 12 a day, live female babies. This baby right here, in 5 to 7 days, will be giving rise to 12 live female babies a day. That's why you get that explosion of numbers in your yard. But the impact of aphids is more than just that there's so many of them there. And there's another aspect of their biology is how they eat. They have what they call piercing, sucking mouth parts. You see it here. It's like a sharp a spear that goes down here, scanning an electron micrograph and they put this mouth part into the leaves or into the stem of the plant and they suck the juices out of the plant. And those juices are largely sugar because that's a byproduct of photosynthesis I'm not going to go into, but that's a fact that most of the juices or liquid in a plant are very heavily sugars. And aphids are like any animal, including us. They need more than just carbohydrates or sugar. They need fats, they need proteins, they need minerals, they need vitamins. So in order to get the proteins that that aphid needs to do whatever it does, it has to gobble up a lot of this sugary fluid from the plants. And they have modifications in their intestinal system or in their digestive system where they can excrete all this excess sugar. It is now known as honeydew. If you have had aphids in your yard, you have had honeydew. It can look like the leaves on the right panel as droplets, or it could be a sheen of a glossy sheen over the entire leaf, which I've seen on roses, for instance. Aphids get in trees. They can drop honeydew onto your car, your deck, your driveway, your umbrellas. It can be a real mess. And other than just being a gooey mess, there's other attributes to honeydew that impact our garden life. One of which is honeydew is the perfect and the only growth medium for a specific fungus called black sooty mold. You see it here in these two pictures, and that just the leaves on top and the leaves on the bottom and the citrus, as well as the orange. It's mainly a cosmetic issue. It's really not, it's unsightly, but it's not going to cause any major problems. And if you should happen to peel that orange with your teeth, it's not going to hurt you. That's not the issue. The bigger issue with respect to what's going on in our garden is that ants love honeydew. Ants are another what I would call bad bug because of what they do, as I'll go forward with this. And the ants, there are lots of different types of ants. There are native ants, which are being driven out by the invasive species we all have in our backyards called the Argentine ant. That's that little tiny black ant that gets into your house, into your cat food, your dog food. It can be quite a mess. And we get a question at our Ask the Master Gardener tables, at farmers markets, at our help desk, all along the way. People come up and go, ants are crawling all over my veggies, all over my fruits, all over my trees, all over my flowers. Why? Well, because they're looking for something. And what they're looking for is honeydew, because ants feed on honeydew. They feed on it themselves and they take it back to their nest to feed their larvae, their babies. Because it's so important, it brings us to the word of the day, which is myrmecophily, which you do not have to remember, and I encourage you not to remember it unless you just like it. It's an interesting word. So what does myrmecophily mean? Well, it is the symbiotic relationship between ants and aphids. So what is symbiosis? Symbiosis is a relationship between two parties that they both benefit from the relationship. You scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. You help me, I'll help you. With respect to the myrmecophily idea, the ants get the food and the aphids get protection. Aphids get protection from the predatory and from the predatory and the parasitic insects I'm going to talk about in a little while. So it's very important, ants, to manage the aphid populations, and they do that. They farm the aphids, they move them around, they corral them. In the picture on the right, you see some wings here. Aphids usually are not winged. There are certain species that have more winged varieties than others, but if a winged aphid should show up, the ants will grab it, shoot the wings off, and not hurt it, so they can get the honeydew from it. And the ants then stroke the honeydew, stroke the aphids with their antenna to get the honeydew. So it's a very complicated, interesting interactions. And it even more interesting and complicated, but the ants produce chemicals to manipulate the aphid nervous system. They have mouth secretions that inhibit wing formation. Aphids can develop wings if they are stressed, or if they want to escape, or if their food source is dwindling. So the ants can inhibit that to keep the aphids all in one place. And the ants have what they're called exocrine glands on their feet. Exocrine means outside. They produce chemicals to the surface of the body rather than inside the body. And these glands produce a compound that tranquilizes aphids. It's a really amazing biology, and it is important to us because if you have aphids, you likely will have ants. And to control aphids, you need to control the ants. There are other honeydew producers in addition to aphids, and they are related to aphids. They are all true bugs. They're in that group of insects I call bugs. And the next one are called scale insects, and they have different looks about them. This is a cottony cushion scale, a brown soft scale, a black scale. There are armored scales. The only scale that moves around as an adult is the cottony cushion variety. The other ones only are mobile when they are nymphs, when they were young ones. They crawl around, they're called crawlers in that stage. Then they settle down, they lose their legs, they develop this shell over them. It can be a flat shell like this one or a round shell, and they start sucking the juices out of the plant and producing honeydew, and the ants protect the scales from certain parasitic and predaceous insects. Next honeydew producer are called whiteflies. These can be really problematic in the garden. In the upper picture, you see two adult whiteflies and the nymph, the baby. Whiteflies are not flies at all. They are actually true bugs related to aphids and to scale. They have piercing, sucking mouth parts. This is what you would see on the bottom of a leaf, and they are protected by ants. The picture on the right was an interesting one. I took this picture on a sweet bell pepper leaf this past summer, and these spirals that you see are quite beautiful, actually, and they represent wax spirals within which the eggs of the giant whitefly are. So if you have a structure like this on a leaf, you have giant whiteflies. Giant whiteflies look kind of like the ones on the left, but they're a little bigger. They maybe have a little different wing structure, but these are piercing, sucking insects like the aphids, and they do the same type of damage. The last honeydew producer I want to talk about are called mealybugs. They are not one of my favorites. They're kind of disgusting, actually. The one on the right you see is an adult mealybug. The ones on the left is a whole colony, and these are all the nymphs of the mealybug. And once again, these are also related to aphids and to whiteflies. They can be very problematic. Here you have them on a grape. I have a small vineyard in my backyard, and I have mealybug problems, and it can look like this if I don't pay attention to it. Another thing that mealybugs are a very serious pest on succulents. This is an echeveria from my backyard, and you see this white stuff right here. That's the honeydew from the mealybug. What makes it very problematic is they get very deep down in the rosettes where you can't get to them. You need to keep an eye on your succulents because mealybugs come out in the spring. They don't come out as a mass, they come out individuals. If you can grab them then with an alcohol swab or something, you might be able to keep the infestation low. But let's go away from the piercing, sucking mouth parts into the chewing mouth parts and our friend, the earwig. This is a very nice picture of an earwig. This is a male earwig. The males have the bigger curved pinchers that you see here. A lot of people call them pincher bugs. They will pinch you. I've been pinched by them, but it doesn't hurt. They're not strong enough to hurt you. The females have shorter, straighter pinchers in the back. And in some cases, the earwig can be considered good. It can eat an occasional aphid or soft-bodied insect. They can do some breakdown of leaves and things in the soil to help decompose things. But generally, they're considered a pest because they do this kind of damage to your plants. They are particularly noxious to sprouted plants that they just come out of the ground. They just germinate. They decimate them overnight. Small seedlings, small plants can be decimated. I have problems every year with eggplants. I get small eggplants, and the earwigs can cause considerable damage to them in a hurry. So these guys are definitely a bad bug that need to be managed. Beetles represent the biggest group of insects. right now, there are at least 350,000 different individual species identified, and the experts say there are many more that have not been identified. They can be big ones and little ones, or brightly colored ones and drab ones. And you see just a montage here of a few showing that they can be a pest to trees like the elm leaf beetle, to vegetables like the cucumber beetle and the potato beetle, to fruit, the green fruit beetles, ornamentals, the Hoplea beetle, and the spotted cucumber is also eats ornamentals. This Hoplea beetle likes white or apricot colored roses and not red roses. Go figure. Then there's a group of insects called weevils. There's about 60, 90,000 varieties of them, but usually about a few dozen in California. They're called snout beetles because of this obvious structure in their head. Their mouth parts are down at the end. Weevils can do some damage to all sorts of flowers and grains. This particular one really has no significance to the garden because it is boll weevil. Unless you grow cotton, which most of us don't. But it's a neat picture. I wanted to have it. Beetles are a pest. They can cause a lot of damage, and they're very hard to manage because usually when you see the damage, they are not there. They're gone. They flew away. So manage them with pesticides is very difficult, but you can manage their babies, which I'll talk about in a little while. Now we're going into another group of insects, the lepidopterans, which are the moths and the butterflies. I've already talked about butterfly earlier. This is a Carolina sphinx moth, and you can tell two things from this picture. One, the moth is quite large, and two, the person needs some serious nail work done. This is a moth. It has a siphoning mouth part like a butterfly. So they drink the nectar from a flower. They do no harm to the flower, and they can pollinate flowers. But like all adults, they lay their eggs. I caught a big Carolina sphinx moth in one of my tomato plants this past summer. I caught her, threw her into the chickens, and went back to where she was and found this one egg. A single egg, and when I blew it up at high magnification, you can actually see structure within that egg. I've never seen that before. It was really fascinating to see it. But here we go. The biology, the metamorphosis, the adult lays her eggs, and her egg hatches into what? A larva. We call it a caterpillar. Many of you probably looked at this and said, aha, a tomato hornworm. Actually, no, it's a tobacco hornworm. And you know that because of the spine and the rear end is red. If it was black, it would be a tomato hornworm. And the tomato hornworm comes from a different sphinx moth. But you know what? They're functionally the same. They have little different stripes and different spots at the end, but they are functionally the same. And what do? They eat your stuff. And if this was one of your prized heirloom tomatoes, I would predict that you would say this is a very bad bug. They eat the fruit, they eat the leaves, they eat the stems, and they can be very damaging in high numbers. When they have had their fill, they go down to the ground and they form a pupa or a cocoon, as you see here. If you pick it up by this little handle, it will wiggle, which the chickens like. But this is most definitely a bad bug. If you grow apples or pears in Northern California, like here, like in Walnut Creek where I live, you will have the codling moth. As you see, it's a small moth, a half an inch. They come out of hibernation, if you will. They overwinter as eggs or as pupa, come out when the temperatures are around 60, 65 degrees. The males come out first. The females come out then. They mate. The female lays her eggs either on the fruit, on the small apples or pears, on the leaves, on the stems, and the eggs hatch into what is called what? A larva. And the larva burrows its way into the fruit. And you know that by seeing this kind of thing here and even down here. It's called frass, which is a polite term for insect poop. And if you cut this apple open, this is what you see. This is the larva. This is the damage the larva did, and this is probably a combination of frass and fungus, perhaps. And I'll horrify people when I give this talk by saying there's nothing wrong with this apple. There's nothing wrong. You can eat this. Just throw away the larva and this ugly part, and there's nothing wrong with that apple. Now, if that's that tolerance thing, can you accept some wormy apples? If the answer is no, then you need to get into a very rigorous paradigm of insect control, which involves pheromone traps, uh, measuring temperatures, calculating how many degrees above a certain temperature. And you will then estimate the most likely time when the eggs or the larva are on the surface of the fruit or the leaves, and then you treat them with what? A pesticide. And in a mild climate, like here in Contra Costa County, we can have 2 or 3 generations in a season. So you'll be treating them constantly. The other option is to have tolerance and accept some wormy apples. Get rid of the wormy apples. Don't let them pupate, if possible, down in the soil. And you can eat this part of the apple. It's up to you, but it is a choice you have to make. Another summer bug that we run into is called a stink bug. And there are a couple different types of stink bugs, and they cause the kind of damage to fruits and veggies that you see here. It's not really damage per se. There's nothing wrong with this tomato, but the stink bug has sucked out the juices right here and left this little scar. If you try to blanch this tomato to get the skin off to make sauce or whatever you do, it doesn't come off these spots. But there's nothing wrong with this tomato. These are pictures I took in my own backyard of different tomatoes I have, and you see 2 different varieties of stink bug. These are the nymphs. These are the immature versions. And you see the black spots over on the green tomato. That's where the young have been feeding. And when they finally shed their outer skeleton and become an adult, this is what they turn into. You have the conspur stink bug and the green southern stink bug. And you see this long mouth part. This is a piercing, sucking mouth part. These bugs are related to aphids, and they suck the juices out of the plant. And there are squash bugs that look like this. There are other types of stink bugs, and they're called stink bugs because if you squeeze them, they smell like burned rubber, or some people say cilantro or coriander. I don't find those particularly obnoxious. Some people might. But these are difficult to control because they fly away. They live in the stems and the leaves and the mulch down under your tomatoes and other plants. So if you can keep that cleaned up, you can take away their hiding places. They might be easier to catch, to squash them, put them in soapy water, however you want to deal with them. The masked chafer is what many people call a June bug. It is a scarab beetle. That means it's related to that Egyptian scarab I showed you earlier. It's smaller. There are a lot of June bugs throughout the United States. They're all scarab beetles. They're different, but the one we see here is largely this one. And this one has an interesting biology because it does not have functional mouth parts, so it does no damage. It can't eat anything. It comes out of the ground in the spring. It starts flying around and they mate. You'll find them in your dog watering dishes, your fountains, your swimming pools. You'll see that at night around your porch lights. They fly around and they mate. The eggs are laid and the eggs hatch into what? Larvae. But these are specifically called grubs. You've probably heard of grubs. And grubs are particularly damaging to turf or lawns. They also eat the roots of most any plant, but they are particularly a problem on turf. And they cause, as I say, a lot of damage. And not only do they cause damage, but their very presence cause a problem because they are snacks to the raccoons and skunks. Have you ever seen your lawn torn up or rolled back if it's a new turf? It's because the raccoons are looking for the grubs. I got all of these grubs out of one 15-gallon pot. So they're very numerous. That interestingly enough, the pepper that was in there did just fine. So I don't know how to explain that. But grubs can be very damaging. They can be difficult to control, and there is a window of time within which to control them. But they can be very problematic. They're most definitely a bad bug. Now, when I led off this section about bad bugs, I said these are insects that you will have or have had in your garden. This is the one exception to that statement. I hope none of us ever see this insect. It is called an Asian citrus psyllid. This is the adult. She characteristic that she sits at a 45-degree angle like this. These are her babies, her nymphs. And this is the waxy honeydew that they produce. This is what you see in a far away picture of it. Pretty disgusting, actually. And it's not the disgusting factor that makes this such a dangerous pest. It's that the adult carries a bacterium which causes a disease in citrus called Huanglong Bing disease or citrus greening disease. And the psyllid and the disease have virtually decimated certain parts of the citrus industry in Florida because there is no cure for this bacterium. And over a 3 to 4 to 5 year period, the tree will start failing and it will die. And the fruit during that time is bitter and inedible. Has the psyllid and the disease been found in California? Yes. Where? Southern California. Prior to the pandemic, the psyllid was found in Pleasant Hill, El Sobrante, Sacramento, and San Francisco. To my knowledge, the disease has not been shown in Northern California, but the psyllid has been. It is important for us as gardeners to know this. If you see anything that looks like this, do not contact me. Contact your local ag department, whatever county you live in, or go to the web address down there. There's a lot of information from the state. The state will get involved. They will either come out and take care of your tree or tell you how to take care of it. And I almost guarantee you that will involve harsh chemicals. So what have we done historically as humans to counter the bad bugs, that small snapshot of bad bugs that I've given you, or the greater number that are, we have used insecticides, pesticides. This is from the year of my birth in Time magazine. You see, it's a song. My colleagues have said, please, please don't sing. But I remember DDT. I'm old enough to remember DDT. It's been banned for decades. It was an exceptionally effective insecticide. Problem is, killed everything else. And there's been lots of them that have banned isotox, diazinon, and other organophosphates. But if you go to a garden store tomorrow, of pesticides out there. And pesticides are designed to do one thing, and that is to kill something. That doesn't mean they're all as bad as the DDTs. They're a chemical. And sometimes we do need to use chemicals. But we as master gardeners and others think there's a better approach to start with, and it's called integrated pest management. The topic is worthy of multiple webinars, so I'm not going to go over any more than what this slide shows. It's a combination of techniques, biological control, what I am talking about, cultural, how you take care of it, mechanical, physical, and finally, if all else fails, chemical controls. This is the website for the UCIPM website. You could type in your browser UCIPM and it'll take you to this site. I'm going to show you at the end of the talk, come back to this with this address with a QR code that you can look at with your phone and go right to the site. And I'll talk briefly about what that gives you. But this is what we think is the better way to address pest problems. And I'm now just talking about biological controls, which brings us to the good bugs. Now, if the idea of having beneficial insects taking care of the pest insects is something that's appealing to you, you have to make sure you provide an environment for those bugs. And what is that environment? Flowers. It's a win-win. Some of the good bugs eat pollen. Some use flowers as hiding places, places to mate, places to lay their eggs. So you want flowers. Most of us want flowers, so it's a good deal. Here's a really neat picture that I want to describe to you to show you how this works. This is a syrphid fly. It's a fly, it's not a bee, and it's a beneficial insect. Now, flies have a mouth part that's different from what others I've talked about, and it's called a sponging mouth part, and it's right there at the tip of that red arrow, that club right there. And it is touching the end of this long stalk. And this is the anther of the flower. That's where the pollen is. This fly only eats pollen. That's all it eats, males and females alike. But she lays her eggs hatch into a larva that loves to eat aphids and whiteflies and mealybugs and all the rest, and scale insect nymphs. So you need to have flowers, and there's proof. Who are the good guys? Well, there's a bunch of them. There's the pollinators. Now, the pollinators really don't play a role in managing the bad bugs, but they're our friends, so I'm putting them in. They are a good bug. Then you have the natural enemies, the predators and the parasites, which I'm going to go over, and some can kind of be neutral. Think about the praying mantis. I think it's kind of neutral. If it's eating a fly or a twig, you'd say he's good. If he's eating a bee or a lizard, you might say he's bad. Another neutral one that might surprise you is a yellow jacket. In the spring, yellow jackets like soft-bodied insects like aphids, mealybugs, whiteflies, caterpillars, they take them back to their nest. Unfortunately, later when the nest is established, they like hamburgers and chicken breasts, and they can be pests. But the pollinators, here they are. Here's just some of them. The male carpenter bee, the female carpenter bee, the bumblebee on top, the sweat bee over on the top right, and another male carpenter bee. We love to see them. There's lots of native bees. There's non-native species like honeybees. But they're our friends, but they don't really have anything to do with the pests. But the gold standard for the pest is the lady beetle. I grew up calling them ladybugs. People still call them ladybugs. They're not bugs, they're beetles, but nonetheless. And here is this ladybug eating one of its favorites, aphids. But there are specific species of ladybugs that eat mealybugs, that eat scales, that eat whiteflies, that eat other soft-bodied insects. So these guys are good. And what she does, she lays her eggs like all these, and what happens? It's the larva. I showed you this earlier. This is really important. You have to recognize this is a good guy. We have a poster at our Master Gardener tables showing this, and people are horrified when they are educated in that this is a good guy because they've been squashing them because they didn't know. That's why understanding the metamorphosis in a general sense and the life cycle is so critical. These baby ladybugs, if you will, they eat hundreds of aphids in their lifetime. They grow, they get rid of their exoskeleton, and they finally pupate, and then out pops an adult. They are effective and very numerous in our area. Now, this is a very busy slide, and I'm going to explain it to you because it really is instrumental to this whole predator insect idea. This is a zucchini plant. I'm saying a zucchini leaf. There's more than one, but this one is slightly rolled, and it's rolled because you see all this gray stuff here and up here are aphids. And what do you see? So the white arrows, there's 3 of them, are the adult lady beetles. The yellow are the 3 larvae of the lady beetles, and the red arrows are the pupa of the lady beetle. And at no extra charge, you have a syrphid fly, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, which is also a predator. The entire life cycle of the predatory insect is on this leaf. And when you look a week later, you saw this. The leaves are no longer rolled. Are there aphids there? Yes, there are. That's an important point. The beneficials won't eradicate 100%. You have some, but they're controlled. You see all this white stuff here? That's the exoskeletons of the aphids. Excuse me. I told you when the aphids grow, they shed their outer skeleton. So if you go out in your garden, you see aphids and you see all this white stuff, that's the exoskeleton showing that the aphids are growing. But look at what we see on this leaf. We see some remnants of aphids, but we see a mating pair of lady beetles here, a yellow lady beetle here, and all these are the pupa, the entire life cycle showing what these insects can do. The surprise to me was there were no ants involved. Ants usually are involved with aphids, but it could be we used boric acid baits in the garden where this was taken that kill the ants. But regardless, this is demonstration of how effective these beneficial insects can be. The green lacewing is a beautiful insect. You see why it's called a lacewing. There are also brown lacewings. They're very erratic flyers. They fly around all over the place. They will eat an occasional aphid and some honeydew, but what they do is they lay their eggs on these very delicate stalks, which is kind of neat. But look at where she laid her eggs. She laid her eggs at the aphid buffet. See the yellow aphids here and up here. And when these eggs hatch, this is what you see. It's very prehistoric. If you did not know the life cycle and understand this, that the larvae look different than the adults, you might squash this because it doesn't look like it's very friendly, but it is extremely friendly. Like the ladybug larvae, they eat soft-bodied insects. On the ground, you find a beetle called a ground beetle, surprisingly enough. This is the adult ground beetle. This is the baby. Looks nothing like mom. Look at these mandibles, the jaws. Both adult and baby eat insect larvae and pupa. They eat the babies and the pupal phases of like the earwigs or of beetles. These are very common insects. If you have a compost pile, you'll see these all over in there. Don't step on these guys. They're good guys. The hoverfly I've talked about before, which is the syrphid fly, the one I showed you eating the pollen. They're called hoverflies because they hover like a helicopter over a flower looking for aphids. They only eat pollen. You see two of them here, and they look like a bee, but they're not. They're a fly. And you know that because they have one pair of wings, while bees have two pair of wings. These guys fly around and they lay their eggs, and their eggs hatch into this. This is the larva. It's a voracious eater of aphids. I took this on my own rows. You see that? I just let the beneficiaries take care of it. I didn't interfere. And you see these little white structures here and here. That's a perfect exoskeleton of an aphid. This is the most prolific and common predator in my backyard in Walnut Creek. And I see syrphid fly larvae whenever I have aphids, and they're very, very effective. The soldier beetle is a very beautiful beetle with its orange highlights. The likes to eat adult aphids. You see, I often call aphids the Cheetos of the insect world, and you see why. So the adult soldier beetle eats adult insects, and the baby, which doesn't look like mom, eats the eggs and the immature form of that. So you get a win-win. This is a very powerful and good insect to have in your garden. My last good bugs are called wasps. They're called parasitic wasps. I say wasp, and that might conjure up the idea of a yellow jacket or something else that can sting you. These are extremely small insects. There are about 100,000 different types of them. They're all very tiny, less than a quarter inch. They have what look like stingers, big sharp rear ends here, but what they are is ovipositors. They are structures that deposit the egg of the wasp. And where do they deposit it? They deposit it in other animals. And that's why they are called parasitic wasps, because their young become parasites inside the other animal. Here is a caterpillar having a bad day, and here's one about to have a bad day, because these wasps are going to put an egg or two inside those caterpillars. And this is an incredible photograph of a parasitic wasp putting its egg inside an aphid. an aphid. Think about how small that is. Well, what happens? The egg hatches into what? A larva. And the larva starts crawling around and eating the inside of the aphid. This is called a parasitized aphid. The aphid is probably still alive at this point, but the aphid is being consumed. This is like the Alien movies. Something is growing inside you. This is a picture I took in my own garden last summer of a pepper leaf. All of these are now called aphid mummies. They are the end stage. Now the aphid is dead, and the wasp is finishing its development inside the mummy of the aphid. And on higher magnification, you can see where where the wasp has emerged. The fully formed adult wasp comes out of these holes in these aphid mummies. And these parasitic wasps not only do aphids, they do scale insects, they do whiteflies, they do all the bad bugs I talked about. They do caterpillars, as I showed you earlier. They are a fascinating group of insects. And if you have aphids, take a look at them. Go down there and look at, if you have a loop, that's really good because you can see at higher magnification, you'll see something like this picture over here. You'll see what they're doing to these insects. So if you or somebody else is spraying insecticides, even relatively benign insecticides, spraying them through the air, you are killing these insects because you can't even see them hardly. So be very cautious about using such measures. So what can we make of all of this that I've showed you? I hope you found some of this anecdotes interesting, fascinating, and maybe even a little creepy like the alien thing. But their insects are beautiful in their own way, and they're very fascinating. I have just a few take-home messages. First of all, if the idea of biological control is something you find appealing, make the beneficials feel at home. Flowers, annuals, perennials, herbs, trees, anything a flower. It's a place for them to hide, for them to mate, for them to eat. My second take-home message is kind of important, and I made reference to this. Sometimes it takes you'll see an upswing in pests while the beneficial gets established. But once they get established, it's amazing. But keep in mind, you're not going to get rid of 100% of them. You're usually going to see some aphids, but they'll be controlled and you didn't have to do anything else. There is a however, though. And the however is sometimes pest populations become unacceptable. Either the pests are growing too fast, the beneficials don't show up or can't keep up with them, and you have to do something else because you can't stand it. They're eating your stuff. Well, then the idea of insecticides comes up. Use the least damaging ones possible. And there are some that are very benign in the great scheme of things. And I mean, they're benign on you, on your pets, on your grandchildren, on the environment. The horticulture oils are very good insecticides. Neem oil, you probably know. That's from a tree in Southeast Asia. Stylet oil is my personal favorite. It is mineral oil. Both of these have emulsifiers mixed in so they can be dissolved in water, diluted in water. And insecticidal soaps work the same way as the oils. They suffocate the insects. Insects breathe through holes in their side called spiracles, and the oils and the soaps coat the insect and kill them. That's how they work. Do not make your own insecticidal soap, please. UC does not encourage people to do that because not all soaps are equal. There are some soaps that can cause what is called a phytotoxicity, which means a toxicity to the plant. So go buy one. They're not expensive if you want to use soap. If you're using the oils, the only thing you need to be aware of is that if the temperature spikes 90 degrees or higher just after you sprayed them, you can have some damage due to burning of the leaves. So don't spray when it's going to be over 90 degrees. And if you spray today and it's going to be 90 degrees 4 or 5 days from now, that's okay. But just don't do it on the day you're going to spray. These measures, these soaps and oils, they can in fact hurt or kill beneficial insects, so use them sparingly. But sometimes collateral damage is something you have to live with. Now, science has helped us now because there are now more specific controls that have been formulated. And I say they're safer because they're very specific. They're usually a bacterial product. This one is Bacillus thuringiensis. It's called BT. It's a very common insecticide. If you wanted to see, go to a garden store, you have BT, and they have different types of it. But it only kills leaf-eating caterpillars. That's all it'll kill. It won't hurt an earwig or a scale insect or an aphid. All it'll kill is caterpillars. BTI only kills mosquitoes and fungus gnats. You can buy this in a garden store. They're like little cross sections of donuts, little thin donuts. They're white. They're very light. You throw them in wherever you might have standing water, and it'll control the mosquito larvae. There is a granulosis virus listed here that controls codling moths. That's all it will do. You could spray it on your apple trees. It'll do nothing but affect the codling moth. I have no experience with it at all. I don't know if it's expensive, how many times you have to spray, but it is a very specific control that you can use. A lot of people like to use this one. It's called spinosad. It's used and it's approved for organic gardening. It's based on a bacterial product. It controls the insects you see there, but you have to be aware that it will kill bees. So if you spray spinosad, you need to make sure you do it at the right time of day. Now, this is the IPM website. This is where you can go to find all the information I've given you and much, much more. If you have a phone handy right now, you could do it. You could capture this QR code. I'm going to show you in 3 more slides. You'll see it again. Or you could type in IPM, UC IPM, and you will come to this web address. If you type it in, or if you use the QR code, you will come up to this website. This is the IPM website. There's a lot here that you can look into, but what you want to go to is the home and landscape section. That will, let's say you're looking for aphid information, you go to the website, you hit home and garden, you push the button there, and you will come up to this. Lots of information here. And I actually encourage you, if you're interested in this, I have no handout. This basically is the handout. Go to this site. There's a lot of information. Tomorrow, if it's raining, go and look around. But right now, I'm just talking about the aphids that you're interested in. You're at this site, you click here, and it will take you now to this page. And now you have aphid. All the insects I talked about and many, many more in alphabetical order. And you get a PDF. It may be 2 pages, it may be 7 pages. And it talks about the biology and the management of these insects. And if you look above this brown line, it's not just insects that you can learn about. You can learn about plant diseases, weeds, vertebrates. This is a very, very powerful site. We use it in our interactions with the public. And I encourage you to try to find this website and look and learn about these insects, both the good ones and the bad ones. Learn about their biology. It'll help you more thoughtfully manage them. That's it for me. I hope that you learned something new, maybe something interesting. Maybe you were excited about some of the biology. Maybe you were horrified by some of the creepy aspects, but I hope you just have a different perspective about insects. I hope you'll give the good guys a try. I think you will be happy that you did. And thank you so much for your attention. And I'm going to turn it over to Jan now for the final few slides, and I will answer some questions if there's some time. So Jan, take it away. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
All right, thanks, John. We will have time for a few questions afterward. Just going to quickly remind you of, guys, of the many ways that you can stay connected to our Master Gardener program. We have our website you may be familiar with. It's wonderful. Got so much information, gateway to all kinds of information available anytime. You can also find us on all the social media channels or several of the social media channels. And you may or may not be aware of the help desk. If you live in Contra Costa County, you can get personalized help by emailing your questions to our experts. And if you live in another county, most likely they have a help desk as well through their Master Gardener program. And of course, we have a whole new lineup of webinars for 2026. I won't go through them all. We'll just show it to you briefly here, but you'll be getting news about them. And that is now posted, I believe, on our website. If not, it will be any day. So we've got quite a few new ones this year as well. Okay, next I'll just tell you about a couple of surveys that help us provide the programming that you need the most. This first one is something to look out for in the mail. Let's just go back for 1 second. Okay, we're
Okay,
not
sorry
quite
about
up to
that.
this one yet, but that's okay. You'll get a follow-up. That'll be from the UC office, not from us. It's very brief, and its purpose is to better serve the communities, improve the content, improve the value to you all of our events and workshops. So again, it'll be a few months away, but if you can get to that when it pops up in your email, we would appreciate your feedback. And we're so grateful for all your support of our program, the Master Gardener program. Okay, and then what you see here is a QR code, and also there will be a link in the chat section on your screen, and this link or QR code will take you to a quick survey about tonight's presentation. So there are two different things, both very quick. And now I would like to ask John a few questions. There are a number of specific questions about specific bugs and what to do about them. And, once again, you'll be able to get lots of detail on the source website that John's talked about. But we can see if there's some quick answers to any of them. The first one would be mealybugs in lemon trees. John?
Mealybugs and lemon trees. Probably mealybugs and lemon trees would be one of the easier ones to deal with from my perspective. If there are no ants that are crawling up and dealing with the mealybugs, there are predators. There's a mealybug destroyer insect that will take care of them. Now, if there are high numbers of mealybugs and you don't think the beneficial is taking care of them, you can wash them off with a harsh stream of water. You can knock them off. Most of the sucking insects like aphids, mealybugs, whiteflies, if you wash them off, um, it tears their mouth part off. And even if they're crawling around on the ground, they're basically dead. They can do no more damage. So a harsh stream of water, if that doesn't work, I would use horticultural oil on them. Mealybugs are a little more difficult than some because they have a waxy coating on their bodies. And that kind of repels insecticides. Even some of the oils might, but I would try oils on them, neem oil of the stylet or any other horticultural oil. This will be documented on the IPM website in great detail about how to handle the mealybugs, telling you what I just did, up into even pesticides, more powerful chemical if that would be an issue for you. One thing I would do sometimes in citrus, whether it's mealybugs or scales, where is it? Is it just in one little area? Sometimes they are. And sometimes the easiest way to deal with it is cut that out and get rid of it. If it's widespread over the tree, that's another whole nother thing. Try to wash it or use the oils. But that's about all I could tell on those. But there are beneficial insects that will take care of them, but it wouldn't happen overnight.
All right. How about red carpenter bee, or I'm sorry, carpenter bees on willow trees?
Carpenter bees? Well, carpenter bees are good guys. And where did you say they were?
Willow trees, mature willow trees. That's
Huh. Usually, carpenter bees burrow into wood like fences or overhangs, garages. The one way you get around them in the non-live structures is you paint them, and the carpenter bees won't uh,
Hmm.
dig into them. I was not aware of them causing problem with trees, so I can't really address that. I don't really think that carpenter bees are a big problem, but I guess it depends on the context there. I've seen them digging into my overhang over my deck, but they dig a hole and lay an egg, but they're not going to bring down that. They're not going to bring down that structure. I suppose if you had huge numbers of them, they could be problematic, but I really don't know. I've never heard them as being a an issue in trees. But so I would have to do the research myself on that to see what UC would recommend on that. Sorry.
Great. So here's one of my favorite questions. You mentioned pepper working for grubs. The question is, how exactly do you do that? Do you put it in a dish and it attracts the grubs? What do you do with the pepper?
The pepper,
Pepper. Earlier,
I'm
did we not talk about pepper? That's the question earlier. You said the pepper. Well, whoever question that is, you can elaborate on that in there and we can come back to that. Next question. Will the safe insecticides work on fruit flies on indoor plants like lettuce plants that are planted indoors, or do you have a better suggestion for that?
uh, for indoor plants, huh? Yeah, the oils would, I suppose. Did you say lettuce? I don't know that I would spray. Um,
Yeah.
I would spray edibles. It wouldn't hurt you. I don't think the oils would hurt you, but I just would not opt to do that. But the oils or the soaps probably would be effective. Um, once again, it comes down to how big of an issue is it? I mean, if it's inside, you said fruit flies, didn't you? Or did I miss that?
I think it's, hang on a second. Yes.
How many are there? Is your house just covered in, and where are they coming from? Because um, there must be something, some rotten fruit somewhere that they're getting into. I would think. I've never heard that. I've never heard of fruit flies just being an inside pest. Um, but anything that you could use, in the more benign things, the oils and the soaps would be okay, I think. But I don't know for an absolute fact on that because I had never heard of that.
Okay. Yeah, so some of them, some of these pests maybe aren't quite as quite as widespread. Okay, what should you get rid of first, aphids or ants? Assuming you have both, I guess.
Well, yeah. If you get rid of ants, the predators will take care of aphids generally, but also there's ways to take care of aphids, simple ways that can help a lot just with water. Spray them off. That's the first thing you do. Or scrape them off with your hands if you're not squeamish. But if you have a big problem, you need to put out um, ant traps earlier in the season because once the aphids are there and the honeydew is there, the ants are going to go for that. They're not going to go for the bait because the bait that you use, the baits that they use in ant traps are sweet bait. The one that most commonly used, but there's a number is boric acid. And boric acid is very benign. It won't hurt anybody or hurt us. And they take it back to the nest, but it takes time to do that. So you need to get the if you're going to do the bait approach, you need to get that out before early in the season, before the plants get inundated with aphids. Um, if you knock the aphids off with water, if you can actually knock them all off, or if you use a horticultural oil or a soap on the aphids, and the aphids are no longer there, the ants won't come up there because they'll look elsewhere. But ants are everywhere in our county. I think in the state, they're pretty much everywhere. The Argentine ant, and that's the one you're seeing. And so they are very, very difficult to control. And your best bet are baits because contact sprays are only killing the workers that are out foraging. It's not killing the queen. and you need to kill the queen to get rid of the nest. So you need to use a bait. And on the website, on the IPM website, it will talk about different types of baits because there's different chemicals in different baits. And I'm not familiar with all of them. I have primarily used boric acid, um, which um, which works well in the house. But it's a tolerance thing again. If you have ants in your house, if they're on your counters or eating your pet food, and you put a bait station there, you will have ants all over because they'll go to the bait station. So, it's kind of it's a hard job dealing with ants, and but your best bet is just baits and have patience. But the aphids, spray them off, oil them off if you have to. And what I do is I wash them off if they're really bad, and then I let the benefit. I haven't had ant problems too bad on my aphids, so the beneficials take care of them. But I do have ant problems on aphids on peppers. So I have to put my bait stations down on the base of the peppers.
Okay.
Long, detailed answer, sorry.
Okay, leaf miners. How much
Yes.
damage can leaf miners cause, and is it necessary to control them?
Leaf miners are hard to control. There's two different types of leaf miners. There's a citrus leaf miner, which is a moth, and then the other leaf miner on your kale or on your beets is a fly. And you, they are mainly cosmetic. Certainly on citrus, the citrus leaves get deformed. Doesn't really hurt them, but they're ugly. Um, if you try to treat them, there's only a finite amount of time when the egg is on the surface of the leaf, whatever the leaf is. Once the leaf miner gets into the leaf, there's nothing you can do to it because it crawls around in there and no insecticide could get to it. The only thing you could do is if you saw the larvae and they're very tiny, you could squash them, squeeze the leaf. But no, you really don't have to do too much for them. If it's on your things that you're going to eat, like citrus, you're not going to eat the citrus leaves. So if leaf miners are on your leafy vegetables, you may not want to eat the larva. That's a personal preference. But what you can do is if you're growing kale or beets or something, you can use, oh, what's that called? Row cover. It's a fine fabric, and you could put it over loops, hoops of metal or something, and the leaf miners can't get to the leaf. So, but yet sun and rain can get through the fabric, and that's one way to protect against it. Leaf miners usually are pretty hard to control with any kind of pesticide. And another thing, if it's on citrus, since I don't know that you said which it was on, if you prune citrus, that causes what they call a flush, a big increase in new growth, and that's what the leaf miners love. So don't prune,
Mhm.
and don't use a lot of high nitrogen on plants because that causes more leaves, and the leaf miners like that. So that's about all I can say about them.
Okay, so we have about 5 minutes, and since there's a number of questions about ants, you talked about ants a bit, I'm still going to mention what these questions are, and then meanwhile, we have some subject matter experts answering some questions in the actual Q&A section, so they'll get to whatever questions they can, and anything else you'll be able to find the answer on one of
Good.
these websites. So one question was just what's the best method to deal with ants? Another one is about something called, and I'm going to try and pronounce this,
Diatomaceous
diatomaceous
earth.
earth and
Yeah,
borax. What
diat
are those?
yeah, diatomaceous earth actually is very good. But here's the thing about diatomaceous earth. Once it gets wet, it's no longer effective. So you wouldn't put it out now, for instance, at all. You put it out along the base, the foundation of your house, and any insect that crawls across that, they're like little razor blades, and they actually cut the insect apart.
Hmm.
Um, so it is very effective. I've heard, I don't have any experience with putting diatomaceous earth on the plant itself. I've heard that you can do that, but I don't know the efficacy of that or how anything. It is an effective anti-ant treatment, but once again, if you have sprinklers or anything, it gets wet, it's no longer effective. Now, and I believe it'll dry out then if it's in a nice warm spot, but I'm not sure of that. I don't know enough about it. But it is a pretty safe thing to do, at least for us. Although, diatomaceous earth is very fine, and it's for diatoms. They're from little microscopic organisms in the ocean, and they are sharp. And sometimes you need to, when you use diatomaceous earth, make sure you wear a mask. You don't want to inhale that stuff. And you know, I would recommend people that want to use that to go to the IPM website and look up. Diatomaceous earth will be discussed in the ant section, and it'll give you a lot of things to do, a lot of things I talked about, and it'll expand it even more. But ants are really a big problem. And the fact is, we have this invasive species here that's all over California, and they're driving out the native ant populations.
About
So,
borax.
well, borax, yeah, that's boric acid. That's in those bait stations that you can buy. You can either make bait stations, buy the boric acid in a container, or you can buy the self-contained bait stations which you put out. And boric acid, yeah, it just goes back, and it's not an instant kill. It goes back. It's not a like a contact insecticide. The worker ants take it back, feed the queen and the other ants with the boric acid. And I don't know the mechanism of how it kills them, but it does. But it usually takes a few days for that to happen. You put out your bait stations, like if they're in your house, you put out the bait stations, the ants come to it, but you will see a decrease in ant population for 3 or 4 or 5 days, usually.
So speaking of bait traps, and maybe that answered the question, I don't know, but the question was, what are the safest bait traps to put out?
Say it again. I'm sorry.
The question was, what are the more safe of the bait traps that you can put out? And it sounds like maybe you kind of answered that
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. I don't know how to answer it anymore. Oh.
Yeah, it just wants to know, what because I guess they're poison, right? Some of them. So, okay, let me see if we've got anything else. A peach tree with plum curculio.
Aphids.
Curculio.
Peach leaf curl? Peach leaf curl is not an insect. Peach leaf curls is a fungus.
Oh, I think that question was just deleted, so perhaps that person got the answer. It's gone. I think that's just about everything. There was just a question about lady beetles and monarch eggs, and if that's a concern that they would eat the monarch eggs if you use them for, I guess, aphids.
I don't know the answer to that. I I just don't know. I don't know because isn't there, I don't know enough about monarchs. That's not one of my things, but isn't the milkweed noxious to some uh, insects and but not to monarchs? So if the lady beetle ate the egg, it would die, but of course it would destroy the egg. I don't know that that's true. I could be making that up, but I don't know enough about that. If there are any pests that prey on monarch eggs. There probably are. I just don't know what they are.
Oh, that's a good one for next time. Okay, this was an excellent presentation. Oh, that's not a question, sorry. This is an excellent presentation. Thank you. Perfect one to end on. It was an excellent
There you
presentation.
go.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, for coming and sending in your questions and paying attention and being part of our program. And we're done.
Thank you,
All right.
everyone.
Oh, my.